Profiting from chaos, how destabilized regions sustain elite power. In the theater of global power, destabilization is not a failure of governance, it is often a strategy. From war-torn nations to economically fractured zones, instability serves as fertile ground for profit extraction, resource control, and geopolitical leverage. For the wealthiest 1%, chaos is not merely tolerated, it is cultivated, managed, and monetized. Destabilization rarely occurs in a vacuum. It is engineered through a confluence of tactics: economic sabotage through currency manipulation, debt traps, and trade imbalances weakens sovereign economies, making them ripe for foreign acquisition and privatization. Political interference, via intelligence operations, regime change efforts, and electoral manipulation, fractures national cohesion and creates power vacuums exploitable by transnational interests. Cultural fragmentation, often driven by media psyops and ideological warfare, erodes collective identity and makes populations easier to control. These tactics are not random. They follow a systemic logic that views stability as a threat to elite dominance. A self-sufficient, sovereign region resists external control. A destabilized one invites it. For the global elite, destabilized regions offer several strategic advantages. First, they provide access to resources without accountability. In unstable zones, environmental regulations, labor protections, and taxation are often suspended or unenforced, allowing corporations to extract oil, minerals, and agricultural products with minimal cost and oversight. Second, they enable the weaponization of human suffering. Refugee flows, famine, and civil unrest create markets for private security, surveillance technology, and humanitarian aid contracts, industries dominated by elite-owned firms. Third, they foster debt dependency. Destabilized governments often turn to institutions like the IMF or World Bank, accepting austerity measures and privatization schemes that funnel national wealth into elite-controlled financial systems. In short, chaos is profitable. It dismantles barriers to extraction, erodes democratic resistance, and creates perpetual markets for elite-controlled solutions. One of the most insidious outcomes of regional destabilization is the mass displacement of people. Refugees, economic migrants, and stateless individuals who become fodder for the global shadow economy. While headlines focus on humanitarian crises, the deeper story is one of commodified human movement, where undocumented and trafficked labor becomes a silent engine of elite profit. Destabilized regions produce refugees fleeing war or persecution, economic migrants escaping collapsed markets, and children and women vulnerable to trafficking networks. These populations, stripped of legal protections and national identity, are absorbed into informal labor markets where exploitation is normalized and accountability is absent. Undocumented and trafficked labor serves elite interests across multiple sectors. In agriculture, migrant workers toil in fields underpaid and unprotected, sustaining agribusiness profits. In construction, undocumented laborers build luxury developments while living in poverty and precarity. In domestic work, trafficked individuals serve elite households, often under coercion or threat. In manufacturing, sweatshops staffed by displaced workers produce goods for global brands at minimal cost. In the sex industry and mining sectors, trafficking networks feed illicit markets tied to elite consumption and resource extraction. These labor flows are not accidental, they are systemic. Destabilization creates the supply. Border regimes and surveillance technologies manage the flow, and elite-owned industries absorb the product. The exploitation persists because of legal ambiguity around undocumented status, which allows employers to bypass labor laws. Privatized detention centers profit from incarcerating migrants, often owned by elite-linked firms. Global supply chains obscure labor origins, allowing corporations to feign ignorance while benefiting from abuse. Even international institutions meant to protect human rights often lack enforcement power, creating a facade of concern while the machinery of exploitation grinds on. Public narratives often frame elite involvement in destabilized regions as humanitarian or peacekeeping efforts. But behind the veil of benevolence lies a darker truth. Military interventions often secure access to strategic resources or protect elite investments under the guise of counterterrorism or democracy promotion. NGO networks, while doing vital work, can also serve as soft power extensions, shaping local policy, gathering intelligence, and reinforcing dependency on Western aid. Media coverage selectively amplifies crises that justify intervention while ignoring those that expose elite complicity. Destabilization is thus mythologized as a tragedy requiring elite salvation, when in fact, it is often elite orchestration requiring public distraction. To maintain this system, the elite must control not only territory but story. Sovereignty movements, indigenous uprisings, and alternative economic models are reframed as threats to global stability. Activists are labeled extremists. Whistleblowers are silenced. And the myth of elite indispensability is reinforced through every channel of mass communication. In the wake of destabilization, a second wave of elite profit emerges, not from the destruction itself, but from the performance of salvation. Humanitarian relief, disaster response, and charitable aid are often portrayed as moral imperatives. But beneath the surface, they form a multi-billion-dollar ecosystem where defense contractors, food conglomerates, and elite philanthropists monetize suffering while laundering their reputations. Destabilized regions generate demand for emergency food and water distribution, temporary shelter and medical aid, security and logistics infrastructure, and refugee resettlement and border management. These needs are met not by grassroots movements alone, but by elite-owned entities with deep ties to military, corporate, and financial interests. Defense contractors provide logistics, surveillance, and private security under humanitarian contracts. Food conglomerates sell bulk rations and processed goods to aid agencies at inflated prices. Military suppliers outfit peacekeeping forces and refugee camps with gear, vehicles, and tech. Elite NGOs and foundations receive donations, grants, and government contracts while shaping policy agendas. Wealthy socialites and celebrities host galas and fundraisers that double as PR campaigns and tax shelters. Relief work becomes a form of disaster capitalism, where crises are treated as investment opportunities. Rapid deployment contracts are awarded to pre-approved vendors, often without oversight or competition. Reconstruction efforts funnel billions into elite-owned construction and infrastructure firms. Philanthropic branding allows corporations and celebrities to associate themselves with virtue while avoiding scrutiny of their role in the crisis itself. In many cases, the same entities that benefit from destabilization, through arms sales, resource extraction, or political interference, later profit from the cleanup, creating a closed loop of destruction and redemption. Public narratives frame these efforts as heroic. Defense firms are rebranded as logistics saviors. Food giants are praised for feeding the hungry. Celebrities are hailed as global humanitarians. But this myth obscures the deeper truth. Relief is profitable, and charity can be a form of elite consolidation. It reinforces dependency, shapes public perception, and allows the architects of chaos to masquerade as its healers. In mythic terms, the displaced are not merely victims. They are exiles, wanderers, and hidden builders. Their stories echo ancient archetypes. The exile carries forbidden knowledge, cast out for seeing too clearly. The wanderer traverses thresholds, revealing the fragility of borders and the illusion of permanence. The hidden builder labors in silence, constructing the very empires that deny their existence. By reclaiming these archetypes, we invert the elite narrative. The displaced are not threats, they are mirrors. Their suffering reveals the architecture of global power. Their resilience exposes the lie of elite indispensability. Destabilized regions are not anomalies. They are alchemical crucibles where suffering is transmuted into profit and sovereignty is dissolved into servitude. For the 1%, chaos is currency. It maintains the illusion of necessity, the machinery of control, and the architecture of global dominance. But this system is not invincible. Its power lies in secrecy and narrative manipulation. By exposing its logic, reframing its myths, and reclaiming the language of sovereignty, we begin to dismantle the empire of engineered disorder and awaken the possibility of a world no longer ruled by profit from pain.